So thanks for hopping on today. Really appreciate the time. I
Thank you
think
for having me.
a cool place to get started would just be like high level understanding the realm of marketing measurement and what challenges brands tend to face in that respect. I know you have a lot of experience helping brands overcome these challenges. So just giving us a general sense of like what is top of mind for you.
Yeah, I think what's top of mind for me is like it's an evergreen topic, right? Marketing measurement as a topic just never seems to go away. As much as we advance things, the questions always remain. I think if I break it down into three sets of challenges that most companies face when they try and get into measuring what they get for their marketing, it really breaks into three things. The first is around the data and the setup. So it's all the preparation, if you will. The second is around the methodology, whether we're talking about running experiments or doing a study or building a model or whatever. And then the third is you get the results, you get the analysis, you get hopefully some insights. How do you turn those into action? So those are really the three things: the data and the setup part of it, the methodology part of it, and then ultimately the action part of it that companies face.
Interested on how you've seen brands overcome some of these challenges with attribution and their data concerns. Where do you typically advise brands to start with that?
Yeah, so I like holistic methodologies, right? And so I like the idea that you can use modeling, for example, to answer a series of questions, and then you can use experiments and test and learn to answer another set of questions. And maybe you even use other techniques, research, studies, et cetera, to answer other questions. So I like the idea of pulling multiple methodologies together into a single place. One of the first things that I talk to my clients about is don't go into this assuming there's one silver bullet magic tool or model or methodology or whatever. You're probably going to end up with a toolbox, if you will, right? So that's one of the first things. And then I think the second thing is, if you assume that you're going to end up with a toolbox, like you probably need to get alignment within the organization on the numbers that toolbox is going to produce. And so the idea that you as a marketer will go and get the magic model or the magic experiment or the magic study and somehow that be able to turn to the rest of your organization and say, look, here's the answer, and have them accept, that is just not likely to happen. And so you should be thinking from the beginning about how you can get organizational alignment and buy-in, what the entire toolkit you're going to want is. Like, you should be thinking about what that end state looks like versus pursuing the magic model or the magic test or the magic tool.
Yeah, and that's something that we see across a ton of clients is that in my mind, marketing should really move in lockstep with finance because it's a revenue driver. It can bring so many positive things to a business, but often the language that the two organizations speak is quite different. So being able to establish that common language, to your point, before we move into tools and strategy and asking for more money, I think is essential.
Yeah. I think so. If you go back to what I was saying earlier, if you have the data and then you have the tools or the methodologies, and then you have this organizational alignment thing that drives insights to action, I find that most of the discourse is in that middle thing. People are really fascinated by what's the tool, what's the model, what's the acronym? Is it MMM? Is it MTA? Is it AB? Really focused on that, and they lose sight of the other two things, which I actually think are in some ways the magic of getting all my data in one place, the magic of having a really good discipline and rigor around the way I set up experiments and I test and I learn. On the one hand, like that setup part is really important. And then ultimately, I come up with some analysis, I come up with some insights that my organization buys into, and then that in turn changes what we do going forward as marketers, right?
Yeah.
Like everyone thinks that the thing in the middle, that methodology or tool, is going to be the unlock, and actually in most cases it's the thing that's on the other ends of that are the unlock.
And to your point, I feel like that whole tool thing has been very well addressed by the market, right? There are a lot of providers that will come in and give you an MMM or help you do A/B testing, or there are individuals who can do it internally. But that communication piece, data unification, translating insights to action is really where I think a lot of these models tend to not stand up to muster or not be satisfactory to brands when they purchase them, because they buy another one every year and it just collects dust or it doesn't get refreshed regularly. It never gets buy-in across the organization. People don't really trust it, and then it just have to do it again the next year, which can be frustrating.
And to be clear, like there are really important technical and subtle differences in methodologies and in all the different maths, if you will. And so you can't ignore that. But if you think that solving just for that is going to solve your problem of marketing measurement and how do you prove what you get from marketing, then you're kind of missing something, which is, one, are we actually set up organizationally to do it from a infrastructure standpoint, from a data standpoint, from a logistical standpoint? And then also, if we actually solve it, are we going to do anything differently?
Yeah. I mean, while we're on the topic though, would love to get your perspective on MMMs in particular. I think people have heard the term before, vaguely familiar with maybe what they get out of an MMM, but just your perspective on high level what that is and what value it can provide, I think would be really helpful.
Yeah, I find marketing mix modeling really interesting because in some ways it's a really old technology, if you will. The origin story of MMM, I won't go into here, but like, I mean, effectively, it's been around as a discipline for 35 years or so. And what started out as like, you know, in the United States in consumer packaged goods only with very national level models is today pervasive across industries, and we're building models that are being refreshed, you know, on frankly an ongoing recurring basis, you know, at very granular levels of detail. But for as much as people know about it now, because it's been around for so long, I don't feel people necessarily understand it very well. And so I try to simplify it, right? And at the simplest level, these things are big regressions, right? So I put on one side the equal sign, what I'm trying to explain. Usually that's some measure of unit volume of sales, but you know, it could be subscriptions, it could be downloads, it could be pounds of cheese sold, like whatever it happens to be that I'm trying to explain. And on the other side is all the potential causal factors, right? And some of those are under my control and some are not. And some of the ones under my control are marketing and some are not. But all of them, whether they're under my control or not, whether they're not marketing or marketing, like what is each individual isolated contribution to driving that end outcome of pounds of cheese sold or subscriptions or downloads or whatever it is you're trying to explain.
Got it. Yeah. So I think that's clear. Would love to understand though where you see people struggle with the MMM. So obviously there's that understanding piece, but I would imagine relatively complex regression and then ends up giving a brand some sort of result, which to my understanding is typically spend more or spend less with an MMM.
That's right.
Do you see organizations then taking that and putting it into action, or where does it go from there?
I think the main struggle that I see with clients trying to adopt and interpret a marketing mix model is, one, their ingoing expectation is the model is going to give them the answer. And in most cases, it doesn't actually give them the answer. It gives them a series of answers. And more importantly, it helps prompt a series of very important questions. What if I did more? What if I did less? Like, oh, this is the outcome, but what's the underlying causal factor of that outcome? Reframing your expectations from getting the answer out of the black box to actually getting a series of different answers and insights that leads to a set of series of questions that then drive action. Like that's a better way to think about it. I think the other thing, and this is more, I don't think that the industry of marketing mix modeling has done itself any favors here. They've actually made it harder to understand the outputs. Every MMM presentation that you will see actually has the same basic outline. There's some things around, here's the data we collected. There's some things around the statistical fits of the model. Hey, it's a good model. Then if I know what the total contributions are and I know what the average value of a contribution is and I know what the total spend was, I can calculate my average ROIs. Then I produce some diminishing returns curves or saturation curves, which give me my marginal ROIs. Then I can run scenarios like same for less, more for same, even more for more, et cetera. But no one talks about it in that very simple way of like, here's the menu of what you're going to see.
And then I feel like where I've seen brand struggle and where I've seen BlueAlpha fit in is bridging that gap from like taking all of this really valuable information that the MMM gives you and translating that into, okay, so what do I do? Which is where the actual value lies with the MMM. To our earlier point, like the model in and of itself can be super cool and really advanced, but if it's not actually connected to the business and connected to driving business value, it's just another piece of tech that a brand has bought. So I think we see BlueAlpha coming in and actually translating from insight to action, sitting across the entire portfolio, providing that consolidated view, which an MMM is really good at, but then taking all of those inputs and telling a brand, here are concrete things that you should consider doing next. And then
I think that's exactly right. Yeah. Keep going. Sorry.
no, I was just going to say, I think the other issue we typically see is the MMM typically sits at a rather high level. It sits at the overall channel level. It doesn't necessarily go down to campaign level of detail. So if you're thinking about actionability and executability, it often requires some legwork for a brand to drill down deeper and say, okay, I should increase meta spend, for instance. But I'm running 50 campaigns at Meta. I don't know actually where to allocate this spend within these campaigns. So a brand like BlueAlpha, where we'll like have these proprietary agents that go and actually allocate that spend at the campaign level, can really take that valuable insight about meta spend is good and make it something that can actually be achieved by a brand. Because putting all 50K increase in meta spend into one campaign is probably not the right answer, but nor is randomly allocating it, just because you should not just spread it across all the campaigns.
The first one goes back to what I was saying before about people focus on the model and the tool and whatever, and they forget about the how are we going to turn this into action, and then they forget about the data thing. Like what you described around how you build the model, how you set the model up. Like, do I want to actually measure the performance at a campaign level? Well, if I do, then I want to code and structure my data originally to fit that outcome, right? Same thing, like if I work with a retail client who has an e-commerce website and they have an in-store thing, and maybe they even have a catalog business, for example, like if I want to read the impact across those 3 different channels differently, then I need to set the data up that way to begin with. So again, this is really important, that data and setup part. And then on the other end of things, in terms of like, okay, I'm going to get some analytical output. Hopefully it's insightful, but how do I turn that into action? I think AI in general, and specifically what you guys are doing at BlueAlpha, the application of AI and agents to helping marketers interpret and apply the learnings coming out of the model, and not only the model, by the way, but also experimentation and consumer research and all these other inputs. Like I think that is a big unlock, because the way that models in particular have historically been delivered is in a really big PowerPoint presentations. Not easy to use, like online portal interfaces that like no one wants to log into. But the notion of having an agent help me interpret all these disparate sources of data and insight so that I can make better informed decisions and choices, I think that's a big unlock.
Yeah, and honestly, in my former life before I joined BlueAlpha as a consultant, that was a lot of my job, was to be the person thinking about how we translate all of these inputs into action. And now we're in the age of AI where you can have an agent that probably does that better because it's the only thing it's thinking about, and it can take in all of these sources at once and get you to those actionable insights even quicker and on a weekly basis, so you're not dealing with outdated modeling, which I think that's another major source of error or anxiety for brands, is that you run the marketing mix model once a quarter, once a year, and then you're going back to outdated information about what your mix looks like and where you're over or under invested as well.
Yeah, and importantly, if the historical delivery mechanism was the 100-slide PowerPoint deck, for example, and I got that 4 times a year, and it was always the same deck, they literally just changed the numbers in. Most of the numbers didn't actually change that much, but you still had to sift through 100 slides and pick out the ones that actually did. So the notion that I can use an agent and I can use AI and filtering to say, here's what's changed, here's where the difference is. And by the way, based on the difference, we might suggest you test doing more or test doing less, right? Or here's the difference, but we don't know why. So this is where you should go dig and find out. Like that's super helpful, because now I'm not just having to troll through that 100 slide. I'm actually being able to focus my time as a marketer on, okay, what's different, what's changed, why, and what should I do about it?
Yeah, and those are the key questions every marketer wants to know, right? Like, it's hard to tell when you're running campaigns across 10 different channels and starting and ending at different times, and they're all giving you their own proprietary attribution information that doesn't necessarily tie back to your first party data. So it's a difficult problem, but the questions themselves fundamentally aren't that complex. It's really like, I want to know what's happening, why that's happening, and what to do next. which sounds
No,
simple.
that's right. Historically, I think a lot of it has just been the delivery mechanism of whether it's the output from a MMM or the output from an A/B test, or I have to log into a platform over here to get some numbers and a platform over here to get some numbers and the platform over here to get some other, like just the
Yeah.
delivery mechanism has been not very efficient, frankly. And
Yeah.
the onus is on me as the marketer to have to go across all these data sources, understand them all, triangulate to what I think is the right answer, and then go make something happen. That's a lot to put on an individual. Agents and AI can absolutely help with that.
Yeah. And it's almost doing a disservice to your brand if you're not taking into account all of the wealth of information that you have, right? So you've run incrementality tests before. Those learnings should definitely be looped into the MMM when you run it again. And as a marketer, as a person, it's really hard to consistently take into account the weighting of those and what you should value over each other. But again, with agents, I think it becomes really easy to get a better and better snapshot of what's happening and to refresh it on a regular basis, such that you're not ignoring all of that information because it's too much to take in, but you're actually getting valuable insights from it, which is really great.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. I was talking with the CEO of a modeling firm the other day, and he was talking with me about a client. They've got an MMM, which shows you like an average lift, if you will, over an extended period of time, a couple of years. And then they've got one or two different A/B tests that will show you the lift in one experimental window, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the client was struggling because the numbers don't perfectly match with each other. But the numbers are never going to perfectly match with each other. The idea that they would perfectly match with each other is a false hope to begin with. If I've got these 3 data points, I've got 2 tests on the lift, and I've got 1 average lift over a period of time, how can I triangulate across those to get to what I think is probably a pretty good answer? And now what do I do with that answer?
There's that famous quote, all models are wrong, but some models are useful.
Right. That's right.
And yeah, you can't be expecting a model to do everything for you, but you can make extensive use of them, particularly with other models in conjunction with them and with some sort of overlying agentic workflow to make use of all of them in conjunction with each other, which is valuable.
I mean, like, my background's in consulting, and the simple act of just creating a table, which is like, I've got an MMM, I've got test 1, test 2, test 3. Maybe I've got some research on advertising recall, and maybe I've got 1 or 2 other data sources, online display, and I've got search, and I've got social, and maybe I've got some outdoor, maybe I've got some TV, that whole thing. And just being like across the board, do I have green arrows? Do I have red arrows? Do I have inconclusive arrows? Like, where do I see the consistent patterns? But like, it sounds simple to pull that table together, but when you're pulling that table together across all these disparate data sources, and by the way, as a marketer, this is only one part of your job, like that's really hard to do.
And also, if you're pulling it together from those disparate data sources, there's absolutely no way you're taking into account top of funnel, for instance, correctly, because that's not going to come through if you're using your last click attribution, and brands aren't going to self-volunteer that they weren't great at driving the end conversion. But it's really helpful as a brand to know where you're getting that top of funnel traction that's leading to your end conversions, even if it is weeks or months down the line. And pulling back on those data sources can be really damaging without having an understanding of where your initial interest is coming from.
That's right. No, that's exactly right. And like a lot of times the analytical sources that give you a lot of signal may not actually be accurate for answering the question, right? So like a lot of things, particularly in platform metrics and search and display and social and whatnot, they'll give you a lot of immediate signal, but that signal might not actually be the appropriate signal to answer a question like you're saying around like, okay, but how do I think about my investment in upper funnel activities, brand building, mass reach, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, we've had crazy instances with clients where we've gone in and done our own measurement of CAC, for instance, and found that for their key online channel, CAC was 350% higher in reality than it was based on what the channel reporting was from the platform, which is an insane difference. And as a marketer, there's absolutely no way you have the time or capacity to be recalculating everything and not trusting anything that's coming out of the platforms, because half of it is accurate. Like the baseline data they give you is accurate. They're not lying to you. They're using models that I might argue in some cases are a little bit flawed in terms of telling you their attribution, but they're giving you this accurate information. So it's nice to know and have that little bit of a safety net that there is a third party out there that's on your side and not the platform
right.
side, getting you an accurate sense of what's going on.
That's right. Like on your side in the sense of sifting through all of these disparate inputs to get to, if not the truth, a series of potential truths that you can say, okay, that I can go test, or that one I believe in, or that one I'm not sure about. So I need to do more work to get to the level of sureness.
Yeah. And with a tool like BlueAlpha, where it'll proactively suggest, hey, we've noticed this, you should probably go test this channel to understand the true incrementality here, which is the statistically rigorous way to do that and get the right answer. And it's nice that it sits all on the same platform and can feed back into the MMM when it's done, get fed into the recommendation engine as well. So you know that everything is being taken care of if you do in one place, including your organic sales, your offline channels, all of it.
No, I think that's exactly right. I think that's a huge part of the value and the unlock that BlueAlpha is providing, really, is that ability to pull disparate sources of data, analytics, insight together, and then prompt you as the marketer to take the next best action.
Yeah. Maybe since I know we only have a few minutes left, let's connect this back to where we started the conversation on the communication front, because yes, we have complex models that can get you really good information and take in all your data. Yes, we have this one platform like BlueAlpha that sits above all of that and can take in all the information, translate it into regular language for you. But then I think there's the last bridge of understanding and communicating value, which happens at the organizational level, where you have your growth team, your marketing team circling back up with, say, the CFO or someone like that to communicate what the value they're providing, what the next steps are, and the learnings that the team has had at a brand level, which I think is where everything comes back together.
Yeah, and I think if I was going to pinpoint, like, what's the single biggest problem with marketing measurement, like, it's this, which is too much marketing measurement is marketing sitting in the corner, grading its own homework, and then turning to the rest of the organization and saying, look, I got an A. And the rest of the organization is like, I don't believe you. I just fundamentally don't believe you. And so if I was going to change one thing about the way that companies pursue marketing measurement, again, if you go back to like the data thing, the methodology thing, and then the alignment thing, like start with the alignment thing. How do you get from the very beginning a working team that's not just marketing, but it's marketing and finance and sales and pricing and whoever the relevant stakeholders are that have to believe the answer that comes out of those models and methodologies and tools, right? Get them on board from the beginning. Then you do the hard work on the data, and then you build the tools and the models and the tests that spit out the numbers so that when the numbers come out, you're not perceived as grading your own homework. The numbers that come out are a shared organizational set of numbers that everyone understands where they came from. And then we can have a debate about which ones we believe or don't believe or don't like or whatever. But fundamentally, no one can say, I don't understand where it came from and I don't believe it.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, the CMO and the CFO should really be allies, right? Same end goal in mind, covering two different sides of the same organization, and something like a common language of measurement and success can really help bridge that divide.
I've always said, if you made me a CMO tomorrow, like my very first, usually as a CMO, your very first call is like to your agency, right? If you made me a CMO tomorrow, my first call, the first meeting I would want would be with the CFO. And my agenda would be every number that I show where finance is present, I want finance to understand where that number came from and have blessed or at least been part of building the methodology that produced it.
Completely agreed. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for the time. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.